Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Drinkwater. I'll be leading this webinar on how Plaid Forecast supports strategic enrollment management and planning in higher education. I just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded. So if you have colleagues who couldn't make it or you're not able to join for the whole time, this will be available on our website over the next couple of days. We'll send you an email when it's ready to go. The chat function is enabled as well. I believe at this point you can see my PowerPoint, but let me know if that's not the case. That was my reminder, start the recording. Okay, I'm Andrew Drinkwater. I am co-founder and president at Plaid Analytics. We started Plaid 7 years ago. We're based in Vancouver, Canada, and we exclusively help higher education institutions work successfully with their strategic enrollment management data and analytics. We empower SEM professionals to actively plan and better serve their diverse learners while meeting institutional goals. We've worked with a variety of leading academic institutions across North America over the last several years, some of which are joining us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to working with you in the future. Plaid provides a strategic enrollment management data and analytics platform designed for universities and colleges by professionals who've worked in the trenches of admissions, advising, and many other areas of the institution. These scalable solutions allow institutions large and small to be able to integrate and analyze their data easily and automatically, forecast their future using the best forecaster in the business, and govern access, lineage, and definitions. Plaid's SEM data and analytics platform enables data-informed decisions and strategies for colleges, universities, polytechnics, and others who are passionate about higher education, and supports the other STEM pillars around promoting student success, creating student-centered services, improving communication, collaboration, and aligning the goals, especially of cohorts that you're bringing into the institution, with the mission and context of the institution. Today, we're going to focus on Plaid Forecast, our newest product released just this year. So where did this idea come from? Once upon a time, I was an enrollment forecaster working at a top research university facing rapid growth, evolving tuition rates, and shifting program mixes and government targets. When I first started working there, we used Microsoft Excel for our forecasting. It was pretty quick, it was relatively easy to use, and it often had lots of human error embedded within it. Over time, we moved to using R, Java, Oracle, and Tableau for our forecasting. These were more scalable, but they still weren't very easy to maintain, and they often contained different kinds of mistakes. Both of these techniques worked pretty well for large programs like a stable Bachelor of Arts, but they didn't work particularly well for new programs like a Bachelor of Media Studies, or small programs like Child Nuclear Medicine that only admitted one resident every couple of years. Through this process, by making a more technical system, I had inadvertently become a gatekeeper for the university. I was the only one that could run the forecast, and in particular, I was the only one who could debug it when something went wrong. This resulted in days and weeks of delays that weren't really ideal. I was fortunate to work with an AVP at the time who was passionate about what we were doing and trying to build a better enrollment plan. That AVP asked great questions, and she was patient while she waited for my answers. She often defended how hard it was to be able to do the forecast. But I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could make it so that she could run her own scenarios on the bus on her way to campus for the enrollment planning meeting, back when you came to campus for such things. She'd be able to see real-time results, run scenarios on her phone, and as a bonus, not being a morning person, I could get a few more minutes of sleep. So I'm proud to say we've invented a way to do this. So where do we fit into enrollment? As you know, the word enrollment means lots of different things to different people. It may even be spelled differently, as you've seen undoubtedly in our presentation already. We're focused on the right-hand side of this chart. So we're focusing on the planning side of the equation. How many students are we going to have where within our system over the next however many years? We're starting out with the purple part, the darker purple part that you see here. So we're looking at headcount and full-time equivalent, or full-time load, or full load equivalent, depending on your terminology. And then we'll be moving towards tuition over time. The green parts of the chart suggest that new applicants and new admits are something we hear often from institutions, particularly those with programs that are 2 years or shorter. This is something that we're looking into and to see how we could make it work really well for this, but it's not there yet. We see this process as an ideal input to the larger budget and financial planning and analysis process. We don't intend to replace your budget process, but we do think that we can do a much better job of getting accurate student estimates into there, because tuition is one of the largest drivers of revenue for institutions. And so getting it to be accurate really makes a huge difference in terms of who can we hire? Do we need to do layoffs? How can we invest in student success, et cetera, et cetera. What we're not doing is the part that's on the left. So we're not focused on individual student interventions, such as with an early alert tool. So here's some things that we've seen in strategic enrollment management. There's often a lot of common challenges. So the first one is responsibility, as in who even is responsible for SIM? Is it the registrar's office? Is it student enrollment? Is it institutional research and planning? Is it IT when it comes to data? Is it academic affairs and individual faculty deans and associate deans? Is it somebody else? Or is it really all of us? And the answer within many institutions is it's actually all of us. We need to find ways to work collaboratively to be successful strategic enrollment management. We see challenges with data prep and automation as well. And so lots of very talented analysts spend more time than they would care to admit preparing data, gluing it together, and making sure that one spreadsheet and one database talk to each other well enough that they're able to do an enrollment forecast. But this underutilizes their talents. And often they don't get enough time to get to the part of the process that they really are passionate about, which is usually finding insights in the data. Why does the forecast say what it says? Or how can we improve the accuracy of that forecast? We see challenges with accuracy and scalability. So I hinted at a couple of these earlier. Accuracy is really hard when it comes to small programs. If you have less than, say, 100 students in a program, using something like a 3-year moving average is simple. It's just not particularly accurate. The methods that I'm going to show you today involve simulation modeling, so you can get much better confidence intervals for your data. There's also some challenges around scalabilities. So most large universities and colleges offer well over 100 academic programs, and this can challenge basic tools for forecasting. It means we can't have all the variables that we want because it's too complex, or it means we're at the upper limits of what the tool can handle when we put all our programs into there. If we even want to dream of modeling tuition as well as enrollment, then our tools break. Collaboration and version control go a little bit hand in hand as well. So when it comes to collaboration, what we often see is that spreadsheets can be shared through shared drives and emails and so on, but it falls apart a little bit when somebody goes on vacation or falls behind on their email, which I know has happened to a few of us from time to time. And so you end up getting things like final for Senate final version 3, in part because somebody fell behind. And now you have multiple versions of the truth that you have to figure out how to reconcile. Often tools that are built in Python or R lack sufficient user-facing functionality to enable true collaboration. My dream here is that a dean of science, say, could actually go into this system and know what it means for their faculty if the dean of applied science ends up admitting more engineers than planned. What it often means is they have to put on more first-year calculus courses than they thought, and they have to scramble to hire sessional instructors. So making it possible to collaborate throughout the process quickly and easily and in real time is really important. So to be a little bit more successful with SIM, particularly from the data analytics perspective, we want to be able to share the responsibility among the stakeholders who are involved. We want to make it possible to collaborate in real time. We want to make it so that you're no longer dependent on one highly skilled staff member who might get a different job, might win the lottery, etc. We want to make it so every one of your staff can run this thing, and advanced technical skills are not required. We want to serve as a resource that we want to redirect your highly skilled staff members to be able to serve as a resource to help your stakeholders understand the patterns of the data and what they might be able to do about them. When it comes to data prep and automation, we've got customized and automated data preparation. So that means with some support from your IT, a direct integration through your APIs or institutional gateways, et cetera, so that the data can come into this automatically on, say, a set schedule. Maybe you want the forecast update every month or every 2 weeks. I wouldn't recommend every day because that tends to result in people coming in the next day and going, hold on, I looked at this yesterday, what changed? But it's possible. So it depends on the culture of your institution, how used they are to data changing on a daily basis. In terms of scenarios themselves, those can be updated on a schedule or ad hoc when necessary by clicking the run button. In terms of accuracy and scalability, our methods have worked particularly well for all kinds of programs, small, new, large, and everything in between. Early testing has suggested accuracy within plus or minus 5 full-time equivalent students 1 year out. We're looking to do more testing on this to stress test that. You can include as many programs as you want and as many scenarios as you need to create. I'll note that the word programs may mean different things to different people. So how you define a program for enrollment forecasting purposes could be different than how it's defined in your student information system. We can handle that. I'll show you that shortly. When it comes to version control, this is a web-based platform. Everybody gets access to the single source of truth, and we're developing sharing, delegations, and approvals as well. Okay, so I set up a poll for those who are live today. And we've got 2 questions, and they revolve around whether your institution has an enrollment planning process at all, is question 1, and then what kinds of stakeholders are involved. So you should see a pop-up on your screen now with the questions. If you're able to answer them, that would be awesome. Okay, so it looks like most people have had a chance to respond. There's a couple more trickling in here, but I'll summarize what the results are looking like for now. So in terms of the first question, whether your institution has a formal approval process for enrollment plans, 63% of those live today said yes, they do. And the remaining 38%, with some rounding there, said it depends. Nobody who's live today said that they don't have an approval process for enrollment plans. In terms of the stakeholders that are involved, several people said that the registrar or student enrollment professionals were involved. 3/4 of respondents said institutional research and analysis was involved. A little over half said that there was a SEM committee of some variety involved. 3/4 said deans and associate deans were involved. A few said that the provost and vice president academic was involved. Interestingly, none checked off associate vice president academic, so that role may depend on kind of how your institution's structured as well. And then about half said that academic program leaders were involved. So this was chairs and directors, like a level below deans typically. Nobody said VP finance, but about half said AVP finance. So thank you everybody for participating. And I'll share the results briefly here just so you can see if you wanted to. Okay, so moving onwards. So one of the things that we set out to do, and we want to do some more work on this because we know we've only got the first few examples mapped out at this point. But we wanted to look at what enrollment planning processes typically look like in institutions. So we picked a couple of universities in Canada that we thought had documented their processes particularly well. We found a few others, and we're keen for other examples if you're willing to share them in the chat. So at Queen's University in Ontario, Canada, the process begins with meetings with deans where they review enrollment priorities, applicant demand, program capacity, and other issues that may impact enrollment. They've got a strategic enrollment management group. That's the SEM group that you see there that reviews data on Queen's applications, province-wide applications, sector trends, provincial policy and initiatives, and annual faculty and school enrollment plans. That group develops the preliminary targets for all the faculties. Those are presented, apologies, that group in collaboration with the deans develops targets. Those are presented to the SEM group and assessed against the data, university priorities, and goals. The SEM group recommends those targets to the Senate committee, I lost the name, SCADP. So a Senate committee related to undergraduate studies is my interpretation there. My apologies for missing that one. The first 2 years are presented as targets for actual approval. The third year is presented just for information. That committee then reviews and recommends those to Senate for approval. Same pattern that they approve 2 years and 1 year for information, and Senate has final approval of the process. On the other side of the country, the University of Alberta is a little bit different. So the beginning of the process is initiated by the provost and vice president academic, who sends a priority letter to initiate the undergraduate planning process. The deans with the VP and registrar prepare an annual enrollment plan for each faculty to ensure their area meets the overall targets from the comprehensive instructional plan. The vice provost and registrar advise the deans on faculty-specific concerns, including how to develop or calculate metrics, analyze and apply data, review SEM goals and priorities. Deans then submit annual plans to Provo and VPA for review. The Vice President Academic and Provo approve that annual plan and then submit it through the CIP, the Comprehensive Institutional Plan. That goes to the General Faculties Council, who recommends it to the Board of Governors. And ultimately the VPA and Provo submit that to the Board of Governors, and they're responsible for annual accountability reports, including checking how well they did on their target setting over time. So where does an enrollment forecasting tool fit into these processes? I would say as a general rule, with something like Queen's, it fits a little bit more towards the left in terms of the actual planning portion of it. That is creating scenarios, sharing them with your colleagues, getting approval, etc. Where it fits more towards the right is in terms of long-term review. So when we have workflows that indicate things like Senate approval in this case, those can then be stored and saved for future years. So maybe next year's scenario planning begins with this year's Senate approval. Similar at the University of Alberta, places where you see deans involved and review processes, this would align with scenario planning. And as we move more towards accountability towards the right, the advantage of having a web-based platform for enrollment forecasting means that everybody will be in the loop on how well we did with our scenario planning. Okay, so you'll notice that there were no examples for colleges and polytechnics. We haven't found any great examples that are documented of how institutions like these engage in enrollment planning. So if you have any examples, it would be great if you could share them in the chat so that we can begin doing more work on understanding the common patterns in the space. Thank you in advance if you can. So let's get into enrollment forecasting. So Plaid Forecast is a web-based enrollment forecasting platform built exclusively for higher education. It uses supervised machine learning and enables collaborative, easy-to-use, accurate enrollment forecasting by many stakeholders in your institution in seconds rather than hours. The idea here is to save you time. We're creating forecasts in seconds, not days. There's no delay when an analyst gets backed up or goes on vacation. The results are better based on our testing so far, much better. This enables the possibility of increasing the revenue or better planning for it. It allows you to have strategic foresight because you know what your plan is going to be in advance. This is collaborative and governed, so all your stakeholders can be involved, but there's security around who gets access to what. Over time, you'll also be able to improve your utilization by better aligning the kinds of classes that you offer with the kinds of students that you're hoping to admit. You can also reduce your risk. So the biggest one that we see here is you have a single enrollment forecaster who's responsible for the forecast. A tool like this helps reduce the risk of what happens if they leave or change jobs. All right, so this is our tool. So some of this is pre-recorded, and then I'll move into a live example shortly. So this is showing login, which is integrated with your single sign-on. Our example was Microsoft, and then it shows setting your time zones, which turns out to matter more in an era when many people can be remote. But the really fun part is around creating scenarios. So what you see on the left is the desktop interface. On the right is the mobile interface. It's going to ask you to create a name for your scenario and say, how long do you want to forecast for? 3 to 5 years is most common from what we've seen. We're then going to pick one or many programs and we're going to set some intake targets for them. So let's say we want to admit 1,500 Doctor of Medicine residents in the next year or so, and see what that happens. We have the ability to edit scenarios as well. So in addition to those medicine residents, maybe we want to add pharmacy residents and PhDs in arts. And so here we're going to say we're going to admit 3,000 of each of those, and we can hit save. We can also clone scenarios. So imagine that was a good starting point. We're now going to create a scenario just for the next year that uses those intakes that we created previously as our start. And here we're going to add the Bachelor of Education students into the mix. And there's going to be a lot of them, 5,000. So what happens from here is we run the scenario. And I'll show you this part in real time just so you can see how it works, but this is the results section. So in the example that's recorded for the results, we admitted a whole bunch of Doctor of Medicine students. And when we want to drill into our results in more detail, we can get things like median and 5 and 95% confidence intervals. So for example, this is a plumbing program that we're currently filtered to. And let's say the capacity was 20 students. What we see with the blue line is the median estimate. The yellow line is the high estimate, and the orange line is the low estimate. This comes back to that simulation modeling I talked about earlier. What that would matter in fall 2024 for is if we hit either the low or the median estimate, the orange or the blue, we only have to offer one class. But if we hit the yellow one, we have to offer a second class for this plumbing apprenticeship. You may also notice that these lines are trending towards 0 over time. That's because we didn't define future intakes. So we eventually run out of current students and the ones that we chose to admit for this version. There's also a variety of institutional customization. So you can tell us if you call them faculties and programs or something different. We also have definitions for programs. So here you can combine programs if you need to. And you can also turn forecasting on and off for different programs. This information comes from your student information system, but you can customize it further from there. Next up is time periods. So we know institutions schedule their lives in different ways. So you might have 3 semesters per year, 4 quarters per year, semesters for standard regular studies and semesters for continuing education studies, et cetera. These are all possible through the interface. And so you tell us what your language looks like, and we'll try and speak it. So this looks, walks, and talks as though it's your tool. We also do the same for residencies. So in the interest of time, because I realize we're coming up on 5 minutes, let me flip to a very quick live demo just so you can see this in a real environment. And then we will turn it over for questions. Okay, so this is the desktop interface. And when you first sign in, you're greeted with a timeline. So you can see that I updated a roundtable demo a little bit before this webinar just to make sure everything was working as planned, and in good news it was. So let's go to our scenarios, and I'll show you quickly how to create a scenario. And I'm going to name this as live webinar. And I'm going to say, oops, let's not do a 1,000-year forecast. That would be a bad idea. I'm going to say 5 years for my forecast. I'll hit create, and momentarily it will take me to my scenario. Okay, so here we're greeted with a variety of parameters. So I know Air Canada's had some challenges recently. So let's say we want to bring in a bunch more students over the next few years who can help with airport operations to kind of speed things along. So this wasn't in the video you saw earlier because we have new versions of the bulk editors. So let's just pick some random numbers. That's probably a lot. So we'll go with something like that. So kind of a wide variety of airport operations professionals, but they should spike in 2024 winter. So we'll hit save, and then the parameters are saved. If we wanted to apply the same intake to every program, we could also use the bulk editor and just change the number of students like that. I'm going to hit cancel on that though, because my previous parameters were saved. Okay, so now we can see here that no run of this scenario has been done yet. So I'm going to hit run, and I'm going to use the default of 1,000 iterations. Cole's notes on that is less than 100. It's a little bit like flipping a coin. 1,000 means that it's much more statistically sound. So we can see that this is queued now. And if I hit refresh, we can see that it's running. And we can see now that it's completed. So that took about 10 seconds, all things considered, between queuing and running. That did 1,000 simulations for every single one of our programs, including the ones that I did not provide intakes for. Our idea here is that a Dean of Arts might only care about their own faculty and only update their own intakes, but they want to know what's going on elsewhere. So here, if I hover over the chart, we can see our airport operations spikes in 2024 winter as expected. Everything else over time trends towards zero because we haven't defined intakes beyond that. But there are other scenarios that do. I think it's this one. So when we pick a scenario that has had intakes defined for multiple different intakes, we see less of that trend towards zero over time. Though we've got to continue to add future intakes for it to trickle back up again. Last but not least, I wanted to mention two other things. When I was at the AIR conference in Cleveland recently, I demonstrated this a lot. So we've got 11 runs of this dinner in Cleveland scenario. And we have history on every single one of them. So we know every change that was made, but you can see here that we admitted lots of doctors. When we go to more results, we can also compare this scenario with any other scenario. So if I wanted to compare it with that dinner in Cleveland as an example, I can then choose to compare it with the latest run or with any number of runs that I want. And now it'll go back and fetch all the data for those 3 different scenarios or iterations of that I had, and it'll do a comparison. On this note, so this is a live query to a cloud database, so it sometimes takes about 10 seconds to generate the results if you haven't seen them previously. This also integrates with Tableau, Power BI, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I will say thank you so much for joining us today. As a reminder, Plaid Forecast is a mobile-friendly enrollment forecasting platform that'll save you time, increase your accuracy, and engage your stakeholders in the SEM process. Plaid also offers solutions around data integration, analytics, forecasting from today, and governance. We'd be happy to talk about those any other time. If you're interested in this tool and to learn more, we'd be happy to give a demo specific to your institution. And we're happy to work with you on setting up a trial and beginning a strategic enrollment management needs and readiness assessment. So this concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for joining. I will stay around for questions, but I know some people probably have a meeting coming up shortly. So we welcome questions by email or LinkedIn as well. Okay, questions are welcome in the chat for anybody who remains. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, it's looking like no questions, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you all very much for joining us. Please feel free to email me at andrew@plaid.is or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to chat further. Thank you so much for joining. Take care.